Shirley Carr, and I'm on the board here, and it is my pleasure today to introduce Steve Haynes from Maine Granite Industries Historical Society. Yeah, I forgot about this one. I just want to say Steve and I have been neighbors for 32 years, lived on each side of each other, and he's got a partner here, Juanita Spray, which a lot of the computer work, I don't believe we get done if Steve had
all of it. I couldn't have done it.
So Steve also has his own museum over on the Beach Hill Crossroads, which is worth going to see. He's got a lot of tools and pictures and history and logbooks and I've watched him grow from doing cabochons on the lapidary to being an authority on granite and sandpaper. So take it away, Steve.
Thanks. Good afternoon. This is my pleasure. I love to talk about my granite and the history of the men. This slideshow in particular is special for me. I'd like to dedicate it to Alan Mullison. He died in the 1st of May. He was 99 and a half years old, came to Hull Quarry at 17 years old, and cut paving. I met him and immediately I bonded with this man. He had all the history, the old 20s history. As far as I know, there's none of these men alive today that could tell me the story from the 20s. And so it was very special. So I'd like to dedicate this slideshow to Alan Mullison of Belfast, Maine. The Historical Society has been a dream of mine since I was 11 years old. Ted Spank, a merchant marine, ham radio operator, Jim Collector, took me under his wing, and I apprenticed with him for many summers. Taught me how to cut, polish, and carve granite. At the same time, he introduced me to rock hounds of Mount Desert Island. These rock hounds took me every weekend, and we went all over Maine to the old granite quarries. So this has been, plus my great-great-grandfather was a stone cutter in Northeast Harbor. He went through the 3-year apprenticeship and moved to Boston and started a monument shop after school. So I've got a little bit of it in my blood. Juanita, she is the biggest part of this whole thing. Her great-grandfather, James Sprague, was stone cutter on Islesford. He built all the stone foundation wells and such out there. So it was she and I, when we connected with both of our families' histories, it was just, we were on a roll, and we're not going to stop. So let's have a slideshow. This is very special too, because these men that I've collected that are in the slideshow are the men that were from the 20s that no one knows them. So this is an introduction to these men also and their families. Cyrus Hall, born October 15, 1834, son of Cyrus and Martha Hall. Mr. Hall tried teaching, farming, the lumber, and stone business. Finding stone was his calling, he opened quarries at Oak Hill and Belfast, at Norwich Walk in Somerset County. The Otter Creek Red, which was said to be the finest monumental granite in the country. The big quarry of gray at the Snowflake, and the famous Soame Sound Paint granite from Hall Quarry. Hall's Quarry.
Thank you.
Now this is the wharf. This is the wharf down in the creek in Otter Creek. It's made from the waste stone from the top layers. And so the schooners could come right up and lay on this wharf and collect their cargo. But one downfall on this was that they had to go by tide. The creek would go dry. The schooner would lay in the flats, and they would load it, high tide, float out. So Cyrus Hall couldn't really get serious in shipping large cargoes very fast to the city. Mount Desert Herald, August 24th, 1881. Since July 23rd, Mr. Hall has shipped and contracted to ship 11 cargoes of granite from this wharf. The Green Mountain Granite from Otter Creek is a hornblende, quartz, and feldspar of coarse grain texture, red in color. This granite takes a very high polish because of the lack of biotite mica. These granites from Otter Creek polish absolutely perfect. January 24th, 1882. The Boylston Street Bridge in Boston is to be constructed from granite from this quarry at Otter Creek. The red granite is to be the best monumental granite in Maine. December 20th, 1883. Hall recently shipped from Otter Creek a stone 20 1/2 feet long, 4 feet 4 inches wide, and 2 feet thick, weighing 13 tons. This stone is to be the cap over the main entrance to the Royal Insurance Building, Chicago. We've seen this bridge in person. It is beautifully carved, Otter Creek granite. The worst part is the graffiti is so bad on it that you can just barely see the granite. It's terrible. Captain Gilmore, Mather Hall's brother, died at sea. Monument of Otter Creek granite, 1881, at the Oak Grove Cemetery, Belfast, Maine. The bottom is hammered with the patent hammers, and the monument itself is a polished granite. This monument in the 1880s was all completely done by hand. It was sanded and polished all by handwork. Very time consuming. Omaha, Nebraska, March 13th, 1887, Ellsworth, American. C.J. Hall is about half completed this contract for the Omaha National Bank at Omaha, Nebraska. The material used is to be red granite from Otter Creek. The plans indicate a magnificent structure. The basement is of rock face, above that hammered stone, with much carving and ornamental work. The main entrance is an arch containing elaborate carvings, and above is a tablet containing the words First National Bank in raised, polished letters with carving in between. It is a tribute to Maine material and Maine workmanship that both should be sought for in putting up so costly a building in the far west. This is Haggerty, Angel and Haggerty Quarry. Quarrying granite required the brute strength of both men and oxen. Huge blocks of granite were cut by hand from the quarry, then loaded onto stone wagons and hauled by oxen or horses to the cutting sheds. Italians, Swedes, Finns, and Scotland came in large numbers during the heyday of Hull Quarry. Generally, the Italians and the Scotmen did the fancy carving. The Swedes and Finns worked in the quarries, getting out the stone. Working 10 hours a day, 6 days a week, wages were $2 and $1.50 respectively. Teamsters with their oxen or horses were paid $1.50 per day. One of the Hull Quarry's biggest contracts was the Philadelphia Mint in 1899. This contract called for $500,000 worth of granite, which was awarded to the Standard Granite Company, of which Cyrus Hall was president. Over 800 men were on the payroll for this 18th-month job. New boarding houses were erected and 4 general stores were in operation. Now we have one of those years. We have the ledger book for the Standard Granite Company. It's the payroll book with all these men, their names, and what job they performed.
And how much they made, and how many hours they worked, even the tools.
The schooners Bloomer and Isabel E. Wiley lie waiting to be loaded with paving block at the granite works of Arthur McMillan at Hull Quarry on Somme Sound, designated for the cities of Boston, New York, Philadelphia, or Hartford. Because of the deep water anchorage of Somme Sound, the natural fjord, the schooners could dock and load at the wharf at all times, high tide or low tide, not having to wait, as did most of the granite operations along the Maine coast. The company store of the Standard Granite Company at Hull Quarry carries the workman's good and personal supplies at prices well below retail. Reported the Bar Harbor Record in 1899. Because of the men can live very cheaply at Quarryville, so called before it arrived with its present name. There was a post office with a mail room and a school which was erected in 1883 to accommodate 52 children, but was filled to capacity in 1899 with 93 children. So the town grew in leaps and bounds. Okay. Boarding houses and stores sprung up overnight. Ellsworth American, July 23rd, 1886. W.J. Richardson has a building which combines schoolroom, dwelling house, and store under one roof. Mrs. L.T. Dodge, former postmaster of Seal Cove, has moved her stock of goods into the Richardson store and is prepared to serve her customers with anything from a pound of dates to the latest style bonnet. Mrs. Dodge is very pleasant and attentive to her customers, and we wish her the success she deserves. This photograph was from the Cunningham family, and they heard of the museum, and they took their pictures down off the wall and brought them to me. The Cunningham women were the ones that were running the boarding houses in 1899. So this is a family photograph. Joe Musetti never saw this photograph and was very surprised and didn't know where the building was. C.J. Hall employs, this is the C.J. Hall quarry, right down on the Sound. C.J. Hall employs from 70 to 100 men, 2 horses and 16 oxen at his quarries, and at present is working on stone for 3 contracts. This granite from Hall Quarry on Soame Sound was also operated over the years by Arthur McMillan Granite Company, Booth Brothers and Hurricane Island Granite Company, Grenzy and Ellis Granite Company. It is a biotype granite of general light, grayish, buff color, and it has coarse, even grain texture and takes a very fine polish. And you can see the paint is the feldspar. The darker is the smoky quartz, and the black dots are the biotype mica. Now, which makes this a very nice granite is because this white soda lime feldspar is the white dots. So there's 2 types of feldspar in this granite. So it makes a very good contrast with the gray, the white, and the salmon paint. And it polishes absolutely perfect. No. Yeah. The Belfast Bridge was one of these contracts. Also, the coping stones for the Charles River Bridge embankment, and $1,000 contract for the new addition on the northeast porticos of the St. Louis Steakhouse. And there's right in back there is a fluted column. This column was done all completely by hand, the flutes. Belfast Library, Otter Creek Granite, edge trimmings, Soame Sound paint, granite from Hall Quarry. C.J. Hall was a member of the Library Building Committee. In 1871, C.J. Hall opened a stone yard in Belfast, and in connection with the iron foundry to polish granite. It was continued in 1890. This foundry discontinued until 1890. This foundry, he made all the derricks and winches, and actually was sending, in the 1880s, equipment to Texas quarries. He was, the foundry was huge. They made sawmills, derricks. He actually had patented the Hall polisher that polished granite. St. Mark's Church, March 4th, 1887. The church recently completed in Augusta is described in detail by New Age. The gray granite of which this church is composed was supplied by Colonel I.S. Banks Quarry in Norwich. The 7 polished columns supporting the Cleary story of the pink granite from Soame Sound, Mount Desert Island, supplied by C.J. Hall of Belfast, hand polished to a fine finish. we were in to see these columns, and there were 7 ladies from Augusta that used their own money for each of the columns. There was one lady that sat in her rocking chair and watched her column be erected inside the church. She was an ivy leaf lover, and one of the stone carvers that were putting the columns up went up, and above her column is the shape of an ivy leaf. So her memory is up there on above the column.
And our pictures inside didn't come out.
Congressional Library, April 19, 1888, Bar Harbor Record. C.J. Hall, now in Washington, D.C., has secured the contract as low bidder for the Congressional Library. This structure, when completed, will cost about $8 million, of which $4 million will be of granite. Hall writes from Washington, his bid on the Congressional Library mounts to nearly $300,000. Now, Cyrus Hall's stone is the first layer of stone, the basement stone, and the edge stones on the corners. Another view of the Congressional Library. It took 18 months to do this. James Grant with his twin sons. James Grant from Hall Quarry with Thomas Lyons from Vinyl Haven went to New York, Philadelphia, and Washington, D.C. They were low bidders on paving block, curb stone, basin stone, and stone for the Holyoke Dam. They came back to Maine, putting all men to work cutting stones. And this is a special part of the industry right here. When James Grant and Thomas Lyon went to these cities, they came back with their pockets filled with contracts. Now, there were a lot of Maine farmers that were land poor. And this allowed these Maine farmers to go into their back 40, strip off the trees and soil, and start cutting paving block. So this opened up a lot of quarries on the Maine coast, which we've been to 99% of them. Alan Mullison, the show is dedicated to Alan, was born in Condoret, Scotland, January 29, 1908. He apprenticed in the paving at the age of 14. He came to America in 1925, sponsored by his uncle, who owned the Mount Desert Granite Company. Alan worked at Hall Quarry, Swans Island, Vinyl Haven, and Oak Hill, Swanville. Now, this is a special picture. When Alan showed me this picture, we talked about it, and I said, Alan, and he was 98 years old. I said, Alan, what is in your pocketbook? He looked at me, he said, you goddamn Yankee. That's not a pocketbook. He told me the name and the affair when he got hurt as a young boy cutting a piece of stone. He caught his finger in between the stone and crushed his finger. His grandfather took his hand, pulled out the jackknife, and cut the end of his finger off, saying, Alan, You won't need this anymore. Go see your grandmother. After this episode, Alan, with his satchel, received his first bullet, which made him a man. This was very powerful interview with him. And he stuck up his finger and it was chopped right off.
And
So-
the picture that he's holding is a picture of his little sister who died.
So-
Can't really see her.
Mount Desert Granite Company. This is the Alan Mullison's, Edward Mullison's quarry. Along with Campbell and Macomber, Whiting and Allen, Angel and Haggerty, these were the principal paving firms in Hall Quarry. Strictly paving and dam work.
That is the campground.
Yes, this now is called the campground. Alan Mullison and my first meeting at the College of the Atlantic. It was all by chance, which was a learning experience of a lifetime. I was holding a craft fair, which I'm president of, and I had my museum display. His second wife came in and looked at my display and said, I have someone out in the car, he can't walk. I have someone out in the car you have to meet. After that, it was a 3-year relationship. Okay, 2 years. He was 99, I met him in 98. Very, very neat man. 1,000 block of paving would earn a man $50. A good day, the paving cutter could split 165 blocks. Now this man is working at his banker, and he has the side hammer, or they called it the tiffler, the old man. Now the banker was a half of a whiskey barrel with stone chips inside. This was set on 2 pieces of stone, and it made a very firm banking for the stone to be cut on. A gang of paving cutters at Hall Quarry under their canvas tent and that protected them from the elements. We have the names of these men that was on back of the photograph. The only one that isn't labeled is the little tool boy in the background, the little shop guy. So it's very rare to find a photograph like this from Hall Quarry with men's names on it. The Nubble Quarry, Ellsworth, American, November 7th, 1889. Mr. William B. Bladestill has sold his stone quarry at Sonesville to E.T. Campbell and J.H. Macomber of Ellsworth. Curtis Joy, the able foreman, remains with the new company. This is the Nubble now. Campbell and Macomber of Hall Quarry are finishing part of the stone for the immigrant barracks on Ellis Island, New York City Harbor, and also have a contract for the Boston pumping station. Bright red granite. This is the Phoenix National Bank building, Hartford, Connecticut, 1909. This is made out of the Nubble granite. The Turrets, designed by Bruce Pierce in 1893 for John J. Emery of New York. The The 1947 fire came 500 feet from the main house, but burnt the gatehouse. The stone from the Weber quarry on the Eagle Lake Road built the Taurus. This photograph was taken in 1959 by state geologist Jack Rand, who we've met and interviewed. In 1973, the College of the Atlantic acquired the Taurus, and in 1977, the building was restored under the supervision of architect Rob Cavano. Arthur McMillan and company leased the Hall site at Hall Quarry for 5 years, beginning in 1903. The plant consisted of 12 derricks, 12 hoisting machines, one hanging electric crane with capacity of 15 tons, one locomotive, 2 compressors, 5 steam drills, 25 pneumatic plug drills, 8 surfacers, and 36 pneumatic hand tools. There's a surfacer. The long pole right there in front is a surfacer, and in the last 2 years, this is the surfacer, and it is compressed air. The last 2 years, I've rebuilt one. Last weekend, I actually put compressed air to it, and we used it all weekend, hammering granite. It was quite fun. Contracts in 1905 were the Hartford River Bridge, Connecticut, Potomac River Bridge, Washington, D.C., Brooklyn Anchorage to the Manhattan River Bridge, New York City, and the addition to the Bank of Commerce in St. Louis. This winter, I went to Rockland at an auction. McMillan had a plant in Rockland, Maine. His photographs of Hall Quarry were in Rockland. His photographs of his Rockland plant were in Hall Quarry. So, in Rockland at this auction, I found all of the historic McMillan photographs and was able to purchase them. This is one of them. The completed Hartford River Bridge. Stone at this time still was being shipped by schooners. This is the finished project. One of the bigger buildings, river bridges. Although McMillan secured these important contracts, the industry never regained its vitality. By World War I, all of the quarries had ceased operation. Now this is a Rockland photograph. It's the first photograph we have of Hall Quarry with box stone. A schooner right by. Most of the photographs are from the water. This one is a really neat one that's right on the wharf. It shows the box stone for the bridge. This is some of the carved material for the Hartford River Bridge. This is a photograph of right down on the wharf in Hall Quarry. Now you notice in between all the cracks of this stone are shingles. And the shingles park the stone as if it was a mortar joint. This stone would be taken down, boxed, numbered, then shipped by schooner. In 1923, Booth Brothers Hurricane Island Granite Company, who had been cutting paving on the eastern shore of Somme Sound at the old Rodick site at Sergeant's Point, moved their entire operation to the McMillan site at Hall Quarry. Stone at this time was cut for the interior work for the Cathedral of St. John the Divine York City, and was finished in the mid-20s, and Booth Brothers ceased quarrying on the Sound. The Booth Brothers quarry, Joe Musetti, this one? No, okay, sorry. Booth Brothers hired local men. This photograph was taken in 1925 from left to right. Howard Hodgson, George Chillis, Edgar Richardson, George Young, Altilio Nymphy, Louis Merchant, Jim Robertson, Solomon Merchant, and Mensworth Merchant. So this photograph did not have any of the names, and we took it down in the old timers, Joe and Howard Merchant and Jimmy Grant all got together and the round table, and they put names to all these men. Right now, James Grant and Merchant are still alive, but there's very few men that could have pictured this, answered my questions. The Booth Brothers quarry. Joe Musetti worked as derrick operator and spent most of his time inside the engine house, lifting the blocks from the quarry. So Joe spent most of his time right in that house there, lifting the blocks from here. Now there was a man here that would give hand signals to this man. This man would give hand signals to Joe, and they would lift and turn the blocks.
And the whole side of that building's glass windows, Joe said. And he also said, I'm in there right now.
Yeah. This is a special. The Jonathan Stewart just came to me 2 weeks ago. His photographs. Jonathan Stewart was born in 1886 in Aberdeen, Scotland. He had only 4 years of public schooling. He apprenticed and became a qualified paving cutter at an early age. In 1930, he came to Hull Quarry and worked as superintendent at the Mount Desert Granite Company, Hull Quarry. Bridge on the Eagle Lake Road. Jonathan Stewart cut the granite at Hull Quarry. Beautiful, beautiful stonework. He was an expert. Lester Hartford, still alive, was lead carpenter for White and Company of Hall's Cove. All of the wooden framing on the Eagle Lake Bridge was done by Lester and one other man. Lester volunteered for the experience of this. These are Lester's photographs. He said cameras were far and few between. Lester used hand-cut trees for most of the large timbers and framing of this building, of this bridge. Jonathan Stewart in full body contact with his pneumatic drill, cutting stone for the new Eagle Lake Road Bridge. Now, why I say full body? The drill is being turned by a wrench with this hand here. He is bearing with his chest to push down on the drill. He has a hose here, which is the exhaust of the drill, blowing out the stone dust from the hole. This man is in motion with his stone. Very special. The only photograph of this type I've ever seen. Bridge on New Eagle Lake Road Bridge. Lester Hafford also did the framing of this bridge. So Jonathan Stewart cut the stone for this bridge and the Eagle Lake Bridge. You can tell because the stonework is exactly the same on both bridges. Joe Musetti at the Mount Desert Granite Company quarry, born in August 20th, 1910. At a young age, his parents sent him to America to avoid being drafted into the service in Italy. He came to Hall Quarry at the age of 16. He started work as a tool boy, working up to derrick engineer for Booth Brothers Hurricane Island Granite Company. Also, he worked for Grency and Ellis Company from Frankfort, Maine. In the early 1950s, Joe Musetti quarried the stone for the 3-arch Duck Brook Bridge on Acadia National Park Road in Bar Harbor. This is all Hall Quarry stone. We have a lot of men. I have a photograph of the men, and we have a lot of families coming in, picking out grandfather from that photograph. And then I'm producing biographies for as many of these men in the 1850s that worked on this bridge. As many as I can get. Joe bought this crane from Rockefeller to remove hundreds of coping stones that went to Cadillac Mountain and all over Mount Desert Island. And also Acadia National Park at Scooded in Winter Harbor. So this machine, it's got wooden rims on it, hard rubber tires driven by a chain. Did years and years worth of work for Rockefeller and Joe. This is a real neat picture. We love it. The derrick at Hall Quarry just before it was taken down in the early 70s. The block of granite on that derrick was held by stone dogs. The strain on the derrick and guidelines, it held the strain on the derrick and guidelines. If that block wasn't attached by the stone dogs, the derrick would eventually, in the wind, fall down. So they had to have that tension. The end. So I've got some tools outside, and I've got a block of granite that I'm going to split outside. So if we want to go out, and I'll see if I can hit my hand. So this rock here would actually take 2 drills to perform the holes. Then every so often this hole would be filled with stone dust. The drill would get stuck with all the chips and stone dust in here. The man would take out the drill and dig the stone dust. With the bigger 2-inch drills, they had different size spoons that would go down and dig out the dust. From there we have the trace mark, the holes in, Now the process of the half rounds and wedges. A simple tool a German immigrant brought to Massachusetts in 1760. He didn't know what he was doing. He brought the process with him and started building stone houses. There was the governor of the Common, Boston, saw these stone houses and immediately hired this German immigrant to go to the historic quarries of Quincy, Mass. Bunker Hill Monument followed after that. So very special tool. The man didn't know that he was doing anything special. Each half round goes on opposite the strike line. If I put these this way, the pressure would be going this way and it would be fighting the line. Now if this stone was very big, the stone cutter usually only had a limited amount of these tools. And if he lost them, he'd pretty much have to go home. So he took care of his equipment. The longer we would wait for this cut, the better it would split. So the man in his motion would have 3 or 4 stones going, drilling them, putting in, and letting them set. He would come back and he would trace. And strike them again. He'd come back.
Oh my God, moving.
She's talking to us. It's actually, you can see a very, very fine head crack. And so what we're doing, we're forcing this granite apart, but we've sent this tracing shock wave through it. And so, yeah, we'll cut right on the line. We hit it again with a trace on the bottoms.
Oh, wow. You wouldn't believe it, would you?
Oh my word.
So my grandfather Walsh, who was a blacksmith, taught me to do this.